I hate Gainesville in July. The city is drowning in sticky heat, the air is thick as molasses, and my shirt is sticking to my back 5 minutes after I leave my air-conditioned room. But a contract is a contract, and when Ellis Pryor calls me on a Friday night asking me to deliver a set of photos for a trophy fishing special in person, I nod and agree. Because at 45, I've already learned not to argue with customers and pick my battles. You see, Marion, you're the only one I can trust, Ellis says, in that special tone of voice he uses when he asks for overtime. It's bombastic. I don't want to send it over the net. Cody's waiting, all ready to go, but your pictures are missing. So here I am, 2 hours from home, with an external hard drive in my bag and sweat stains under my arms. The Gainesville branch office of Fisherman's Whirlpool occupies half of the second floor of a former textile warehouse renovated into trendy loft offices. Brick walls, bare ceiling beams, huge windows, and the obligatory table tennis table in the corner of the open space. Everything as it should be. I walk past the receptionist's desk, waving my hand in greeting. They know me here. I come once a quarter, usually with materials Ellis considers too valuable to send. It's more of a ritual, though. The old man likes personal visits and handshakes. I suppose that's the beauty of it in the age of digital communications. At exactly 10 o'clock 30 minutes in the morning, I knock on the glass door of Cody Pryor's office. He's on the phone, but he waves at me, inviting me in. I close the door behind me and wait patiently for him to finish talking. Unlike his father, Cody is always dressed to the hilt, a carefully ironed shirt, a fancy narrow tie, an expensive watch. Today he seems more irritated than usual. "No," I said, "Thursday, not Friday," he barks into the phone. "If you can't meet the deadline, we'll find someone who can." He hangs up the phone and turns to me. There's not an ounce of that good-naturedness in his gaze, for which his father is famous. "Ah, Holt," he says, not even trying to be friendly. "Did you bring the pictures?" I pull a hard drive out of my bag. It's all here, 326 pictures from the last expedition to Lake Okeechobee, including exclusive shots of a trophy largemouth bass weighing 8.5 pounds, plus a series of sunrise landscapes that I think... Cody interrupts me with a wave of his hand. A grimace I've seen on his face more than once, a mixture of boredom and barely concealed contempt. "Download it to my computer. Tanner will handle the material. Tanner is their graphic designer, not a bad guy who we occasionally correspond with on work-related matters." I copy the photos, and Cody looks at me as if I brought him a used paper bag instead of the result of a 2-week expedition. "You know, Holt," he says suddenly, leaning back in his chair, "I've been looking over the budgets. Do you know how much your father pays you for these pictures?" I shrug. My rate is in my contract, and it hasn't changed in 2 years. "Yeah, I know my rates. And you think you're worth the money?" There's a tone in his voice that makes me tense up inside. "I think my work is worth the money," I answer calmly. "And the market seems to agree with that assessment." Cody chuckles and shakes his head. "The market. Daddy's sentimentality is what keeps you afloat, Holt. Any intern with a modern camera will do the same thing for a third of the price." I'm not answering that. We both know that's not true, or Ellis would have found this mythical intern long ago. Fisherman's Whirlpool is not the kind of publication that can afford mediocre visual content. But I also know that Cody isn't interested in my opinion. He stands up, walks around the table, and stops right in front of me. His posture is designed to demonstrate superiority. I've seen this behavior dozens of times in people who confuse position with personal value. "You know what I think, Holt?" He says my last name like it's some kind of swear word. "You're not worth $1. Nobody wants you." The words hang in the air between us. Somewhere outside the window, a truck drives by. Someone laughs in the office next door. Time feels like it's slowing down. I feel a familiar sensation rising in me, the calm, cold rage I learned to control in my youth. I could say a lot of things. About how his father built a successful magazine thanks in part to my photos. That 3 of my covers had won industry awards. About subscribers sending letters asking for prints of my images. Instead, I smile and say a single word. Got it. I take the hard drive, turn around, and walk out of the office. I hear his surprised exclamation behind me, but I don't stop. I leave the office, go down the stairs, cross the parking lot, and get into my old Ford. Only once I'm in the car do I allow myself to exhale. I clench and unclench my fists. I'm shaking, not from anger but from the realization that this is the last time Cody Pryor will ever speak to me like that. The Wayfarer Hotel is cool and quiet. It's not the most expensive place in Gainesville, but it's clean, has reliable Wi-Fi and free coffee in the lobby. I stay here every time I visit on Fisherman's Whirlpool Business. I sit on the bed, open my laptop, and stare at the screen for a long time. Then I take out of my bag a folder with documents, find my contract with the publishing house, and reread it, even though I know every clause by heart. The section on intellectual property rights is clear and unambiguous. I insisted on this wording 2 years ago when I signed the updated agreement. The photographer retains all rights to the photographic works created by him until the full payment for the works according to the specified rates. The publisher receives a non-exclusive license to use paid materials in its print and digital publications. Photographs uploaded to the publisher's server shall remain the property of the photographer until used in publication and paid for in full. Ellis grumbled about the unnecessary legal formalities at the time, but signed, because he appreciated my work, and Cody obviously didn't read the contract, or didn't care. I open the mail and find the latest payment from the publisher. 3 days ago they transferred the advance for the June expedition, exactly half the amount. According to the contract, the other half is paid after publication. So legally all the photos, including the ones I brought today, are still entirely mine. I type the remote access address to the publisher's server into my browser. The system asks for a username and password. My credentials are still valid. I checked last night. The Fisherman's Whirlpool IT department has never been known for its security prowess. The right folder is quickly found. Holt Archive. 3 years of cooperation, about 12,000 photos. Fishermen and their trophies, dawns over the lakes, tarpon frozen in a rush, thoughtful morning fogs over the water, happy faces of people who caught their first fish in life. My life, my work, my hours waiting for the perfect light, my crossings of the marshes, my weathered lips and burned shoulders. I take a deep breath and create a hidden backup of the entire archive in a secure account that only I have access to. It takes time, almost 100 gigabytes of data. While the copying is going on, I go down to the lobby and pour myself a coffee. I talk to the receptionist about the abnormal heat for this time of year. He agrees and adds that the weather forecasters are promising a storm by the end of the week. I nod as if this information matters to me. When I return to the room, the backup is complete. I check the integrity of the files and make sure everything is saved correctly. Then I hover over the main Holt Archive folder and click Delete. The system gives a warning. Are you sure you want to delete 12,347 files? This action cannot be undone. For a moment, I freeze. Cody's voice sounds in my head. You're not worth $1. No one wants you. I click Yes. The deletion takes almost 15 minutes. When it's complete, I methodically go to each working folder of current projects and delete all my stuff from there. Then, I clean out the server trash. Finally, I run a script that wipes metadata and traces of my actions in the system logs. Closing the laptop, I sit still for a long time. It's gradually getting darker outside the window. Evening is approaching. My phone is silent. They haven't discovered it yet. They probably won't until tomorrow, when the designer Tanner starts the layout of the special issue and can't find the files. By then, I'll be in Savannah, in my apartment overlooking the river. I pack my bags, go down to the front desk, and pay for my room. The receptionist asks if I want to stay another day after all. I usually sleep here after an office visit. I shake my head. My business in Gainesville is over faster than usual this time. In the parking lot, I check my phone one more time. No calls or texts from Ellis or Cody. I start the car and pull out onto the road leading to the freeway. I turn on the radio, finding a jazz station. In 23 years as a photographer, I've learned one important lesson: never let others determine your worth. Cody Pryor would soon realize that some people only become truly notable when they disappear. It started raining when I was 20 minutes from the county line. First, a few drops smashed against the windshield, then another and another. And a minute later, a wall of water came crashing down on the car. The windshield wipers could barely cope. Visibility dropped to a few meters and I had to slow down. My phone vibrated for the fourth time in the last half hour. I glanced at the screen. Ellis. Again. I wondered if he was calling on his own initiative or if his son had already complained. I put the phone down. No time to talk, especially when you're driving in a downpour like this. The radio was reporting the news through the rain. The Weather Service is warning of a possible strengthening of the storm to a Category 1 hurricane by tomorrow evening. Coastal residents are advised. I turned up the volume. A hurricane is serious. They usually come in September and October, but global warming has shuffled all the cards. The storm, named Delilah, is moving along the coast at 25 kilometers per hour. Wind gusts of up to 120 kilometers per hour. Heavy rains and possible flooding in low-lying areas are expected. The National Weather Service has expanded the storm warning area to include counties. The phone vibrated again. This time, a text from Ellis. Marion, call me back urgently. All the letters are capitalized, not a good sign. The old man is really anxious. I sighed. I'd better call when I get home. Right now, I need to concentrate on the road. The rain wasn't letting up, and there were small puddles on the highway. In this weather, even an experienced driver could end up in a ditch. The radio kept listing recommendations for preparing for the storm. Stock up on drinking water, check flashlights and batteries, gas up the car, have cash. Standard kit for a coastal dweller. I've been through this dozens of times. The rain eased a bit as I turned onto the Savannah exit ramp. Now, instead of a solid wall of water, there were large, sparse drops falling on the windshield. The phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't Ellis calling, but Cody. Now that was interesting. Junior Pryor never condescended to speak directly to me outside of the office. I ignored the call. Not yet. Let them marinate for a while. Whatever happened in the office, they need to fully realize the magnitude of the problem, and that takes time. In Savannah, the rain had almost stopped, but the sky remained low and heavy. Dark gray clouds crept over the city, promising another downpour. I drove down familiar streets, past neat historic columned houses and small green squares. Despite the weather, tourists still wandered down River Street hiding under colorful umbrellas. Savannah knows how to keep its charm even in the worst weather. My apartment, aka studio, is in a restored old cotton warehouse near the river. High ceilings, brick walls, and huge windows. Everything a photographer who appreciates space and light needs. I parked, grabbed my bag from the back seat, and headed up to the third floor. Upon entering the apartment, the first thing I did was turn on the air conditioning. Despite the rain, the humidity was still high, and I hate stuffiness. I threw my keys on the table by the door and went straight to the refrigerator. I opened a bottle of beer, took a sip, and only then pulled out my phone. 13 missed calls, 7 from Ellis, 4 from Cody, 1 from Tanner, and 1 from an unknown number. 6 messages, all in a similar panic-demanding tone. I smiled and turned my phone off, then walked over to the window. From my floor, I had a view of the Savannah River and the harbor in the distance. The sky was slowly getting darker. Evening was approaching. There were ripples and small waves on the river, harbingers of an approaching storm. Waves. An interesting metaphor for what was happening now. I threw a rock into the pond, and the circles from it were still just beginning to dissipate. Chaos reigned in the fisherman's whirlpool office in Gainesville. Tanner Reed, a graphic designer, was trying for the third time to open a folder of photos for a special issue, but the system kept giving an error. "What the hell?" he muttered, adjusting his thin-rimmed glasses. Yesterday, everything was in place. He called tech support, but the IT guys were busy with some kind of server problem. Tanner glanced at the calendar on the wall. There were only 3 days until the issue was due. He should have started the layout yesterday, but he'd gotten held up with another project. Now that delay threatened to become a real problem. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Cody Pryor appeared in the doorway of his small office. He had a look of ill-concealed irritation on his face. "Well, how's the special issue coming along?" he asked with that peculiar intonation he reserved for subordinates who didn't live up to expectations. Tanner grimaced. "There's a small technical problem. I can't access Holt's photos." "What do you mean? You can't access them?" Cody frowned. "He brought the materials in yesterday. I saw it in person." "Yeah," Tanner answered, trying to speak calmly. "I checked the server. The main archive," he paused, "disappeared." "What do you mean it's gone?" Cody raised his voice. "Files can't just disappear." "Actually, they can," Tanner said cautiously. "If someone deleted them." Cody's face ran the gamut from disbelief to anger. "Someone? Are you saying that Holt?" he stammered, then turned and walked briskly toward the stairs leading to the IT department. Ray Larson, the technical director of Fisherman's Whirlpool, was the complete opposite of Cody Pryor. Tall, sloppily dressed, with long hair pulled back in a ponytail, he resembled more of a rock musician than an IT guy. But no one questioned his competence, not even Cody, no matter how much he wanted to. "Listen, Ray," Cody began, trying to keep his impatience in check. "We're missing all of Holt's photos, all of them. What's the mess in the system? Why are there no backups?" Ray calmly sipped his coffee from a huge mug labeled, "Wake up only if the server's on fire." "There are backups," he replied calmly, "but not Holt's photos." "Why is that?" Cody crossed his arms over his chest. "Because the files weren't accidentally deleted or corrupted. They were deliberately erased by a user with the proper authorization." Ray turned the monitor so Cody could see the screen. "Here's the log file. At 15 hours and 22 minutes yesterday, user Holt deleted all of his files from the server, all of them, for 3 years. Cody stared at the screen as if he couldn't believe his eyes. That's sabotage," he blurted out. "Restore the files immediately." Ray shook his head. "I can't. According to the terms of his contract, all files remain his property until the work is paid for in full. He had every right to delete them." "What the devil?" Cody literally choked with indignation. "Who drafted this contract?" "The legal department in Savannah, I guess." Ray shrugged. "I'm not a lawyer, but as far as I can tell, he didn't technically violate anything. He just took his property." Cody turned and stormed out of the room, pulling out his cell phone as he went. He needed to talk to his father right away. Ellis Pryor was in his office in Savannah when the call from his son came through. Upon hearing the news, he didn't immediately understand its significance. Wait, he said, massaging the bridge of his nose. "You're saying Marion deleted all of his photos from the server? All of them? For 3 years?" "Hell yeah." Cody's voice was ringing with tension. "He left us with no material for the special, and all the archival photos are gone. For the reprints, for the website all gone. Ellis was silent for a moment, trying to make sense of the situation. There must be a reason, he finally said. Marion wouldn't do this for nothing. What happened when he came to see you? Cody hesitated. Nothing much. He brought the CD, we talked for a while, and he left. Talked about what? There was a note of steel in Ellis's voice. About work, about the budget. Cody's a little stumped. Look, it doesn't matter. What's important is that we need to get in touch with him right away and get him to return the files. Otherwise, we're not going to get this issue to print in time. Ellis took a deep breath. I'll try to reach him, but first, check to see exactly what's in his copyright contract. I already did, Cody replied grimly. The technical director is right. Legally, Holt hasn't violated anything. All the unpaid materials belong to him. Shit! Ellis rarely swore, but this was one of those times. I'll call him. Immediately. But all attempts to reach Marion were in vain. First the phone didn't answer, then it went to voicemail, and then it went dead. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Ellis was furious. He paced around his office, glancing at the phone as if he could make it ring with his mind. 12 years, he mumbled. 12 years we'd worked together. And not once had he ever failed the magazine. What was it that Cody had told him? He dialed his son's number again. Cody, I want to know exactly, word for word, what you told Marion yesterday. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Dad, now's not the time for this. We're in the middle of a crisis. The special is in jeopardy. The advertisers will be furious if we don't meet our deadline. That's why I want to know what happened, Ellis insisted. Marion isn't the impulsive type. If he did, he must have had a good reason. Cody let out an exasperated sigh. Okay, if you're that interested. I simply told him that his services were costing us too much, and that any intern could do the same thing for less money. That's it? You could hear the disbelief in Ellis's voice. Well, maybe I was a little harsh. Said something like he's not worth a dime and nobody needs him. You what? Ellis exploded. You said that to Marion? The man whose pictures brought the magazine 3 national awards? Whose pictures have increased our readership by 30% in the last 2 years? It was just a business conversation. Cody tried to defend himself. I wanted to pressure him to lower his rates. Ellis was speechless for a moment. Business talk, he finally squeezed out. Son, in the business world, there's such a thing as professional respect, especially when it comes to creative people. Dad, this is no time to lecture me on business ethics, Cody snapped at him. We have a problem to solve. You're right, Ellis agreed abruptly. I'm on my way to your place in Gainesville. I'll be there in 2 hours. Gather the entire team working on the issue, and get me a copy of Marion's contract. He hung up the phone and sat motionless for a while, staring out the window. Clouds were gathering behind the glass, heralding another downpour. The radio said that storm Delilah was strengthening and might reach Savannah in a day or 2. Ellis shook his head. One storm had already hit his business, and its name was Marion Holt. I woke up to the sound of thunder. The clock read 6 in the morning, but it was dark outside the window, like dusk. The rain was hitting the windows so hard it looked like they were about to crack. I sat up on the bed and stretched. I didn't get much sleep. I was haunted by disturbing dreams all night. In one of them, I was standing on the shore of a lake with a camera, trying to take a picture of a huge fish. But every time I pressed the shutter button, the camera fell apart in my hands. Dreams are silly, but reality was no better. I knew my act would have consequences, serious consequences. I might never work with Fisherman's Whirlpool again. Ellis might even sue me, even though legally I was clean. I went to the window. It was raining. The wind was bending trees, tearing down signs, tossing trash. Delilah was coming, and she was furious. I turned on my phone. Notifications sprinkled one after another, new calls, texts, even emails. All from Ellis, Cody, or other magazine staffers. I flipped through them without opening them. Then I dialed the number of my friend and lawyer Don Kerrigan. "Marion," he answered sleepily. "Do you know what time it is?" "I'm sorry, Don." I looked out the window at the raging storm. "I think I'm in trouble. We need to meet." "Now? In this apocalypse?" Don wasn't exactly thrilled. "The sooner the better. But if you don't want to leave the house, I can come to you." There was a sigh on the other end of the line. "Okay, let's do it in an hour at the Singing Clam. They have a generator in case of a power outage anyway." The Singing Oyster was a small cafe near the river that served the best pancakes and disgusting coffee in town. Despite the early hour and the bad weather, you could always find a regular or two there. I put my phone down and headed for the bathroom. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, stubble, tired eyes, wrinkles in the corners of my mouth, I asked myself, was it worth it? And I answered myself, yes, definitely. No one has the right to talk to me the way Cody did, especially when it comes to my work, what I put my heart and soul into. I took a quick shower, got dressed, and grabbed my car keys off the shelf. Then I changed my mind. In this weather, I'd better call a cab if one was coming at all. To my surprise, the cab arrived only 10 minutes later. The driver, an elderly man with a wrinkled face, seemed completely unfazed, as if he drove passengers through a tropical storm every day. "How far are you going?" he asked as I got into the car. "The Singing Oyster on Brighton Street." He nodded and slowly pulled out. "The hurricane is getting stronger. They say it could reach Category 2 by tonight." "We'll get through it," I said. "It won't be the first, and it won't be the last." "That's for sure," the driver grinned. "My old lady says it's a sign. She always says that when there's a big storm. A sign of change," she said. I stayed silent, staring out the window at the rain-swept streets. A sign of change. Maybe the old woman was right. The Singing Oyster was working despite the storm. The lights were on inside. It looked like the generator was already on. I paid the cab driver and, ducking under the gusts of wind, ran to the entrance. The cafe was warm and cozy. The smell of coffee and pastries filled the room. There were 5 people sitting at tables, regulars who came here every morning, regardless of the weather. Don was already waiting for me at the corner table. He had a cup of coffee in front of him and an open folder of papers. Always prepared. That's why he was a good lawyer. "You look lousy," he said instead of greeting me. "Likewise," I grinned, sitting down across from him. Don really didn't look his best, wrinkled and black-eyed. At 48, though, not many people look fresh at 6 in the morning. "So," he sipped his coffee, "what's your problem this time?" I briefly told him about my meeting with Cody yesterday, his words and my response. With each word, Don's face grew more and more tense. "You deleted all your pictures from their server?" he interjected when I was done. "All of them? For 3 years?" I nodded. "Technically, they're still mine until they're paid in full. It's clearly stated in the contract." Don shook his head. "Technically, yes. But practically, you've just declared war on a company that's provided you with a steady income for years." "They started it first," I countered. "Cody, to be exact. He was out of line." "Maybe," Don agreed. "But are you sure Ellis would approve of what his son said? He'd always treated you with respect." I shrugged. Ellis had given Cody power and control over part of the business, so he's responsible for his son's actions. Don rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Okay, let's look at the situation from a legal standpoint." He opened a folder and pulled out a copy of my contract. "Yeah, it's very clear in here. You retain the rights to the photos until you're paid in full. The company gets a license to use them, but they don't own the files themselves. So, I haven't violated anything," I concluded. "Technically, no," Don repeated. "But there's also the concept of business ethics. You actually disrupted the magazine. That could be considered bad faith behavior. And insulting the person on whom your business depends is, in your opinion, good faith behavior. Don sighed. Marion, I'm on your side. But as your lawyer, I have to warn you of the possible consequences. They could sue you for failure to meet deadlines, for breach of business obligations. But they won't win, I interrupted, because I have written proof of what happened, and my contract protects me. Don looked at me carefully. Did you record the conversation with Cody? I nodded. The recorder's in my phone. I turned it on as soon as I walked into his office. It was an old habit to always record business meetings. Don leaned back in his chair and smiled. Now that's interesting. In Georgia, recording a conversation is legal if one party knows about it, so you were acting within the law. He thought for a moment, then continued. Still, Marion, I'd advise you to compromise. Give them the files back, but put your own terms on the table. An apology from Cody, written assurances of respectful treatment, maybe even a rate increase. I shook my head. Not so fast. Let them realize what they'd done first. Let them feel what it's like when their business depends on you and you're not worth a dollar. Lightning flashed outside the window, and a second later there was a deafening clap of thunder. The lights in the cafe flickered, but the generator did the job. The storm's getting worse, Don remarked. So is your conflict with the Pryors. Just beware. Unlike the storm, which will pass sooner or later, the consequences of this conflict could be long-lasting. I stared silently at the rain drumming on the glass. The ripples from my act were already spreading out, affecting more and more people. Tanner, who can't finish the layout. Ellis, who risked not getting the magazine out on time. The advertisers who had paid to be placed in the special issue. Don was right. It was like a declaration of war. But sometimes war is the only way to make peace on your own terms. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket and turned it off. Let them call. I won't answer it today. Today I'll let the storm play out to its fullest, and only when it reaches its peak will I be ready to talk about the terms of surrender. Mine or theirs, we'll see. 2 days after my visit to Gainesville, Storm Delilah lost strength before reaching hurricane level. The skies over Savannah were slowly clearing, and the flooded streets were slowly returning to normal. The townspeople were coming out of their homes, assessing the damage, and hurrying back to their daily routines. I sat in the living room of my apartment, browsing news websites. The Fisherman's Whirlpool office in Savannah hadn't been damaged. The building was fairly new and well protected from the weather, but the Gainesville branch wasn't. The roof had blown off, and rain had flooded the top floor, damaging furniture and equipment. The server room was intact, however, so the digital data was safe. Except, of course, for the absence of my photos. I still kept my phone turned off, only getting in touch via email. In those 2 days, I'd received 23 messages from Ellis, ranging from polite requests to call back to outright threats of legal consequences. Cody sent one short and dry. Need to discuss the situation. Tanner, the designer, sent the most sincere, Marion, man, we're totally screwed. What's up? I didn't respond to any of them. Don thought I was making a mistake by prolonging the situation. We met in his office yesterday, and he emphatically advised me to go on the dialogue. You can win the battle but lose the war, he said as he went through the papers on his perfectly organized desk. Reputation in our business is everything. If word gets out in the industry that you're unreliable, I've honored the terms of the contract, I countered. I delivered the materials as agreed. Taking my property doesn't contradict my obligations. Don took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes tiredly. Marion, you know I'm on your side. But there's written law and there are unwritten rules. You deliberately put the publication in a difficult position by blowing the deadline. That could be considered bad faith. And insulting your professional dignity is, in your opinion, good faith behavior. Don shook his head. Of course not. Cody's words are unacceptable and I understand your reaction. But no buts, I interrupted. Either my work is worth something or it isn't. If it's not, why do they need my pictures? Let them take that mythical intern Cody was talking about. Don sighed heavily. Take my advice. Refrain from any contact with the publisher in the next few days. Don't answer the phone. Don't write to them. Don't agree to meetings. Let them marinate in their own juices for a while. But then be ready to negotiate. On your terms, of course. That's the advice I followed. Until this morning. The doorbell rang around 10 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't expecting visitors, and at first I decided not to open the door, but the caller was persistent. Through the peephole, I saw Ellis Pryor. He rang again, then knocked. "Marion, I know you're home," he shouted. "We need to talk. It's important." I opened the door but stayed standing in the doorway, not inviting him in. "Hello, Ellis." He looked older than his 60s, tired, with red eyes and deep wrinkles around his mouth. His usually neatly combed gray hair was now sticking out in all directions. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual authority. "I need to talk to you. In person." I hesitated, then stepped back, letting him inside. "Coffee?" I asked, closing the door. "I'll have one." Ellis walked into the living room and stopped at the window, looking out at the river. He was silent while I fiddled with the machine, and I was in no hurry to start a conversation. Finally, I brought 2 cups and sat down in the chair opposite the couch. "Have a seat," I said. Ellis sank down on the couch and took a cup, but didn't take a sip. "You know, I should have been furious," he said, not looking at me, "when I realized you'd deleted all the pictures. 3 years of work, the damn special we spent 2 months preparing. I should have come here and yelled at you, or threatened to sue you, or just fucking fire you." He finally looked me in the eye. But then I saw something that made me think. He pulled a folded piece of paper out of his inside jacket pocket and placed it on the coffee table between us. I took the sheet and unfolded it. It was a printout of the web page of the Southern Fisherman magazine, our main competitor. The announcement of a new special issue devoted to trophy fishing on Lake Okeechobee, the same lake where I spent 2 weeks filming for Fisherman's Whirlpool. "Coincidence?" Ellis asked, and his voice was unexpectedly calm. "Or did you sell our material to a competitor?" I set the printout aside and took a sip of coffee, giving myself time to think. The charges were serious industrial espionage, breach of confidentiality, treason. "These aren't my photos," I finally said, "and I didn't sell anything to Fishermen of the South." "Then how did they get material from the same location, with the same themes?" "Exactly now," I shrugged. "Lake Okeechobee is a popular spot for trophy fishing. Any fishing magazine will do a feature on it sooner or later. As for the timing, could be a coincidence. Or maybe one of your employees blabbed about the upcoming special and the competition decided to get ahead of it." Ellis frowned. "You really had nothing to do with this?" "I swear," I answered, looking him straight in the eye. "I wouldn't take such a petty revenge. And I wouldn't betray you, Ellis. No matter what." He stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to find any sign of a lie, then sighed heavily. "I believe you. I always have. That's why I can't understand what happened. What did Cody say to you that was so serious that you decided to jeopardize our 12 years of working together?" I stood up and walked over to the bookcase where I kept the external hard disks with the archives among the books. I took one of them out, went back to my desk and plugged it into my laptop. "This wasn't a spontaneous decision, Ellis," I said, turning on the computer. "The last straw may have overflowed that day, but the water had been pouring in for a long time." I opened the folder of correspondence and turned the screen so Ellis could see. "There, emails from Cody over the last 6 months. Read them if you want to understand why I did this and not that." Ellis moved closer and began to look through the emails. His face grew more grim with each message he read. "Holt, the material is not of the quality stated. I'll have to cut the fee by 20%. I demand a reshoot. These photos look like they were taken by an amateur on a smartphone. Just a reminder that the deadline was yesterday. Next time, there will be a fine for every day you're late. And so on. Dozens of letters full of disdain, unfounded criticism, and outright insults. None of his claims were supported by facts, and all my deadlines were met to the nearest hour. I didn't show you those letters before, I said, because I didn't want to involve you in my relationship with your son. I thought we'd work it out ourselves. But the last time I saw him, he was out of line. I opened the audio file and played the recording of our conversation with Cody. Cody's voice was clear and ruthless. "You're not worth $1. No one wants you." Ellis listened with his eyes closed. When the tape ended, he was silent for a long time. Then he rubbed his temples as if he had a headache. "I didn't know," he said at last. "I swear to you, Marion, I didn't know he talked to you like that he treats his employees that way at all." "Not just me," I pointed out, and opened another folder. "Here's Cody's correspondence with Tanner, our designer. He sent it to me last week when we were discussing the final layout." Ellis looked at those emails too, even more harsh than the ones addressed to me. "Holy shit," he muttered. "How could I not have noticed? How could I not realize what was going on in my own company?" I shrugged. "You put your son in charge of the branch. It's natural to believe in your children, to give them a chance." "Trust doesn't mean blindness," Ellis objected. "I should have been checking, supervising. Instead, He didn't finish the sentence, shaking his head. He picked up the cup of coffee again, now cold, and took a sip. "Do you know why I created Fisherman's Whirlpool?" he asked suddenly. "Because you love fishing?" I suggested. Ellis grinned. "That too. But the main reason was something else. I'd worked in corporate publishing for 20 years. 20 years of endless meetings, office intrigue, power, and status struggles. I hated that atmosphere. So when I got enough money from selling my stake in an advertising agency, I decided to create a different environment, a place where people would enjoy working, a place where creativity and professionalism would be valued over the ability to lick the boss's asses." He laughed bitterly. "And now, 15 years later, my own son had turned part of my company into exactly what I was running from." I remained silent. What was there to say? Ellis set his cup down and straightened up. "Marion, I want to formally apologize to you on behalf of Fisherman's Whirlpool for Cody Pryor's unacceptable behavior. His words do not reflect the publisher's position and are contrary to our values." The formal tone made me smile. "Thank you, Ellis, but I don't hold a grudge against the company, just the person in question." "I understand," he nodded. "And trust me, Cody's going to be a separate conversation, a very serious conversation. But we still need your pictures, Marion. Without them, the special won't run, and that's a huge loss, both financially and reputationally. Advertisers, contractors, readers, they're all waiting for this issue." I got up and went to the window. The sky over the river had cleared completely, and the sunlight was playing on the waves. After a storm, there is always such a wonderful clarity, as if the world has been washed and renewed. "My terms are simple," I said, without turning around. "First, a public apology from Cody, to me personally and to all the employees he spoke to in that tone. Second, a renegotiation of all artists' contracts to reflect the real value of their labor. Third, complete creative freedom for me within the scope of the magazine's subject matter, no unreasonable demands to redo material." Ellis was silent, and I turned to him. "Is that a lot, Ellis?" He shook his head slowly. "No, it's fair. But there is one problem." "What's that?" "Cody won't agree to a public apology. He's too, proud." "Pride or arrogance," I clarified. "There's a difference." Ellis sighed. "I'll talk to him. I'll try to explain the situation, but I can't guarantee his reaction." Then maybe we should reconsider his role in the company, I suggested. If he's not willing to admit his mistakes, should he be trusted to manage people? Ellis wrinkled his nose as if in pain. He's my son, Marion. I know that, and I'm not asking you to choose between your son and the company. Just think about it. What's best for Cody in the long run? Continuing to act like an asshole and think it's okay? Or learning a lesson that will probably make him a better person? Ellis looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. You're right, but I need time to think things through and talk to Cody. You have time, I said. Not a lot, but you have time. What about the pictures? Ellis asked hopefully. Will you give them back? I walked over to the desk and unplugged the hard drive from the laptop. Here, I said, holding it out to Ellis. All the latest materials are here, but keep in mind that if our agreements are not honored. I understand, Ellis interrupted, taking the disk with care. Thank you, Marion. Really. He stood up, ready to leave, but suddenly stopped. You know what the worst part of this whole situation is? What? That I had to find out about the problem this way. That no one, not you, not Tanner, not anybody, came to me before and said, Ellis, your son's being an asshole. Why, Marion? Why were you silent for so long, I wondered. Really, why? Out of loyalty to the company, out of reluctance to interfere with family relations, or just out of pride. I didn't want to look like a complainer. Probably, each of us thought that we should solve our own problems, I finally answered. And that your son is your blind spot. You know how it is. You can see from the outside, but it's useless to talk until you're ready to see for yourself. Ellis nodded. Maybe. But I'd rather know sooner, before things got this far. He headed for the door but turned around on the threshold. One more thing, Marion, about the fishermen of the South and their material on Okeechobee. I already told you I had nothing to do with that, I reminded him. I know, but I think you could help us, outdo them. Make our material better, deeper. You've got more photos from that expedition, haven't you? The ones that didn't make the main selection. I smiled. Yes. About 200 pictures, which I put aside as not good enough for publication, but they're still better than what the fishermen of the South photographers will be able to do. Ellis smiled too, for the first time in our entire conversation. See, you really are worth every dollar we pay you, and more than that. After he left, I stood at the window for a long time looking out at the river. The conversation left a strange feeling, a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I'd gotten what I wanted, an acknowledgement that I was right, a promise of change, even a compliment from Ellis himself. But I also realized that our relationship wouldn't be the same. Something was broken, and it wasn't just Cody. I pulled out my phone and turned it on for the first time in 2 days. Immediately, notifications of missed calls and messages popped up. I flipped through them without opening them and dialed Don's number. Marion, he answered. You finally turned your phone on. What's wrong? Ellis came by, I said. We talked. And I gave him the photos back, provided all my demands were met. Don chuckled. That's what I thought. You're too sensible to continue this war. What exactly did you demand? I briefly recounted my conversation with Ellis and my terms. Not bad, Don approved. But are you sure Cody will agree to a public apology? No, but that's not my problem. It's Ellis's problem to decide what to do with a son who can't admit his mistakes. What if he can't handle it? If Cody refuses to apologize? I shrugged, though Don couldn't see it. Then Fisherman's Whirlpool would be in trouble. And not just because of me. From what I'd seen in the correspondence, Cody had managed to turn almost all the key employees against him. Sooner or later, it's going to lead to a crisis, with or without my involvement. You could just quit, Don pointed out. Find another publisher, other clients. I could, I agreed. But I love Fisherman's Wharf. I love what we do. And I don't want to give it up just because one person is being an asshole. Don laughed. Okay, I get it. You've decided to stay and fight. Well, good luck to you. And keep me posted. I'm curious to see how it turns out. I will, I promised and hung up. The sun was setting, coloring the river in golden tones. I took out my camera, the same one I'd traveled to Okeechobee with, and snapped a few pictures. Just for fun, for myself. No contracts, no deadlines, no nagging. Sometimes it's worth reminding yourself why you got into photography in the first place. Not for the money, not for the recognition, but for that moment when light, form, and time converge at one point and you press the shutter button, capturing that moment forever. Ultimately, this is what determines the true value of my work, and it's much higher than any amount stated in the contract. The morning was unexpectedly clear for Savannah this time of year. I woke up earlier than usual, around 6 o'clock, and decided to take a walk along the river. After all those days of forced confinement due to the storm, my body needed movement and my mind needed fresh air. The waterfront was almost empty, just a few early joggers and a couple of tourists taking pictures of the sunrise on their smartphones. I grinned as I watched them trying to catch the perfect shot. The light was beautiful. Golden rays glided across the water, creating that special morning glow that is so hard to capture in a photograph. My phone vibrated in my pocket. An unfamiliar number was calling. I almost decided not to answer it, but the professional habit of always being in touch took over. Marion Holt speaking, I answered, sitting down on the bench. Mr. Holt, good morning, came a woman's voice, deep and confident. Veronica Rand, editor-in-chief of Fishermen of the South. I hope it's not too early for a business call. I straightened up. Veronica Rand was a legend in the Southern publishing world, a former war correspondent who had turned a regional magazine into a national publication with a 500,000 circulation. Not too much, I replied, trying to hide my surprise. To what do I owe the honor? I prefer face-to-face meetings for important conversations, she said. Could I see you tonight? Say, at 11 o'clock at the River House Cafe. Curiosity overcame caution. All right, 11 o'clock at the River House. Excellent. See you later, Mr. Holt. She disconnected, and I was left sitting on the bench, thinking, what could the editor-in-chief of a rival publication possibly want with me? Especially now that my situation with the fisherman's whirlpool was tense, to say the least. Back home, I checked my email. Ellis had sent a quick message. Talk to Cody. Complicated. Need more time. Meeting with the team tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Your presence is optional but advisable. I grinned. Classic Ellis. Brief and a little cryptic. What do you mean? Complicated? Did Cody refuse to apologize? Or admitted a mistake but doesn't want to do it publicly? Either way, tomorrow's meeting promised to be interesting. At 11 o'clock sharp, I walked into the River House, a small but sophisticated cafe overlooking the river. Veronica Rand was already waiting at a corner table. I recognized her immediately from photos of industry events. A tall, slender woman in her 50s, with a short cut of gray hair and a piercing look in her gray eyes. Mr. Holt. She stood up and extended her hand for a handshake. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. Just Marion, please, I replied, shaking her dry, firm palm. Then I'm Veronica. We sat down, and the waiter immediately came to the table. Coffee? Veronica offered. Or something stronger? They have a great bourbon. I think I'll just have coffee, I smiled. It was a little early for bourbon, even by Southern standards. She nodded to the waiter. 2 Americanos, please. When the waiter left, Veronica pulled a folder out of her elegant leather briefcase and placed it on the table. I'm used to getting straight to the point, Mr. Holt. Marion, I'm aware of your conflict with Fisherman's Wharf. In our little professional world, few things are kept secret. I remained silent, waiting for the rest. I've also seen your work, she continued. Not only those that have been published, but also those that have been rejected by publishers. Some of them are excellent. Much better than what usually appears in the pages of fishing magazines. Thank you, I replied, a little surprised. But how do you have access to unpublished material? Veronica smiled and her face suddenly became almost girlish. A professional secret. Let's just say I'm good at finding information. The waiter brought coffee and she paused to take a sip. Here's the bottom line, Marion. We're offering you a contract with the Fishermen of the South. Exclusive. Double what you're getting now, and cover credit for every story that uses your photos. She opened a folder and showed me a draft contract. All the details are in here. You can study it. If there's anything you're not satisfied with, we're ready to discuss it. I took the document and ran my eyes over the main points. The terms were really impressive, much better than the fisherman's pond. I was especially interested in the clause on creative freedom. The photographer has the full right to determine the artistic concept of the material within the framework of the agreed theme. This was exactly what I was missing in my work with Cody. His constant attempts to dictate how the images should look, what angles to use, what mood to convey. Impressive, I admitted, handing the document back. But why now? And why me? Veronica sipped more coffee, looking at me carefully over the cup. We've been following your work for a long time, and we've long wanted to offer our cooperation. But you seemed, loyal to Fisherman's Wharf. The current conflict has opened a window of opportunity. So you decided to take advantage of the situation, I said without judgment. That's exactly how business works, Veronica shrugged. We see a valuable resource that's suddenly available and we make an offer. No personal grudges or revenge. Pure business logic. She was quiet for a moment, then added, "Besides, we really appreciate a good photo, unlike some people." The last words were spoken with a slight pressure, and I realized that she knew not only about the conflict but also about its causes. "I need time to think," I said. "This is a big decision." "Of course," Veronica nodded. "You have 3 days. Then we'll have to look at other candidates." She took a business card out of her briefcase and handed it to me. "Here are all my contacts. Call me anytime when you've made your decision." We finished our coffee, exchanging general phrases about the weather and the effects of the storm. Then Veronica paid the bill, despite my protests, and we left the cafe. "One more thing, Marion," she said as we stood on the sidewalk. "If you decide to take us up on our offer, we'd like to start with a series on trophy fishing, preferably with new material. Perhaps the same location as your last project for Fisherman's Whirlpool?" I'm tense. "Are you asking me to use material shot for another publication?" Veronica shook her head. "No, of course not. We're asking you to shoot new material, in the same locations, with the same level of skill, but without violating any contractual obligations to your previous employer." She smiled and added, "We play hardball, Marion, but always by the rules." With those words, she shook my hand in farewell and headed for a nearby parked car. I remained standing on the sidewalk, looking at the business card in my hand. The offer was tempting, very tempting, but something about it made me wary. Perhaps it was how easily Veronica had gotten information about my conflict with the Pryors, or her knowledge of my unpublished works, or maybe the very fact that a rival publication had so quickly offered me a contract on such favorable terms. Either way, I decided not to rush into a response. The situation with Fisherman's Pond was not yet completely resolved, and I wanted to see how tomorrow's meeting would end. At the same time, an emergency meeting was taking place at Fisherman's Whirlpool's main office in Savannah. Ellis Pryor had assembled all the department heads and key employees, about 15 people, including Cody, who had flown in specially from Gainesville. Tanner, a designer with whom I often worked, later recounted it to me in great detail. Ellis began the meeting unusually abruptly. "We have a crisis, and I want everyone to understand the magnitude of it. First, we've lost most of the photo archive for the last 3 years. Second, A special issue on trophy fishing, in which we have invested considerable resources, is in danger of being canceled. Third, our competitor, Ryback Yuga, has somehow learned of our plans and is preparing a similar story. He looked around at those present and stopped at his son. Cody, please explain to everyone what happened between you and Marion Holt. Cody fidgeted in his chair. It wasn't a big deal, just a business conversation about budget and efficiency. I may have been a little harsh, but that's no reason for that reaction on his part. Harsh? Ellis interjected. Is that what you call "you're not worth a dollar? Nobody wants you"? A whisper ran through the room. Yeah, I didn't mean it that way, Cody tried to defend himself. Ellis pulled out his phone, pressed a few buttons, and Cody's voice echoed in the room saying those exact words. The recording I sent him. It's not only disrespectful, Ellis continued when the recording ended. It's unprofessional and it's hurting our business. Marion is one of the best photographers in the industry. His work has helped us win 3 national awards, grow our audience, attract advertisers. But his rates are commensurate with the quality of his work. Ellis cut him off. And even if they weren't, there are ways to negotiate without insults. Cody blushed with anger or embarrassment. Tanner couldn't tell for sure. Okay, I was wrong, he finally admitted. I'll apologize to him personally. That's good, Ellis nodded. But the problem is deeper than that. He turned to the others present. I've received information that this kind of attitude toward employees in the Gainesville office has become the norm. Disdainful comments, unwarranted criticism, pressure. Is this true? There was silence, and Tanner tells me that you could literally hear the clock on the wall ticking. Then, one by one, the staff began to speak. Designers, editors, marketing people, everyone had a story about how Cody had humiliated them, ignored their ideas, refused to recognize their merit. He said my design looked like it was done by a 5-year-old, Tanner said. And when the same design won an industry award, he took all the credit. He made me rewrite articles 5 or 6 times without specific feedback, just because I didn't like something. Lauren, the editor, added. The stories continued, one worse than the other. With each new story, Ellis's face grew darker and Cody's grew more tense. That's enough, Ellis finally said. I've heard enough. He turned to his son. Cody, I'm suspending you from running the Gainesville branch while we investigate and reorganize. It's non-negotiable. What? Cody jumped up. You can't do this. I'm your son. I'm part of this business. That's exactly why I have to do this, Ellis replied firmly. Because you're my son, and I don't want you to destroy what we've spent 15 years building, including your reputation. Cody wanted to object, but Ellis stopped him with a gesture. The meeting was over. Jeffrey, he turned to the CFO, you're going to take over the Gainesville office temporarily. Cody, we'll talk privately. The rest of you are dismissed. As everyone began to disperse, it suddenly darkened outside the windows. The new storm the weather forecasters had warned about was approaching Savannah faster than expected. I found out about all this the next day when I met Tanner at a small bar near my apartment. He called me the evening after the meeting, excited and a little confused. You won't believe what happened, he said. Ellis had given Cody a real public spanking in front of the entire staff. And how did Cody react? I asked, sipping my beer. First he tried to justify it, then he freaked out, Tanner shrugged. Typical Cody. But the best part was after the meeting. He lowered his voice even though the bar was noisy and no one could overhear us. There was a real storm brewing, literally and figuratively. The storm hit the city, and in the office, meanwhile, Ellis and Cody were yelling at each other so loud the walls were shaking. I stayed late to finish the layout, and I could hear everything through the door. And what were they saying? Ellis was accusing Cody of undermining the foundation of the business he was building for the family. and Cody yelled that his father had always valued the employees more than his own son and that he, Cody, was trying to make the company more efficient and profitable. Tanner sipped his beer and continued. Then the accusations of betrayal began. Cody claimed that Ellis was the one betraying the family by publicly humiliating his son. And Ellis responded that the real betrayal was turning their family business into a toxic place where no one wanted to work. That sounds dramatic, I remarked. That's not all. Tanner leaned closer. At one point, the wind tore off part of the roof over the design department. It rained and the computers shorted out. Files, backups, everything's compromised. And then Ellis said a phrase I'll never forget. See what you've done? First we lost Marion's pictures, now this. Without his pictures and with damaged layouts, we won't get the issue out on time. And if we blow the deadline, we'll lose advertisers. Do you realize that your behavior could destroy the business I've spent a lifetime building? I silently considered what I had heard. The situation was developing rapidly and in an unexpected direction. My conflict with Cody had escalated into a full-blown management crisis at the company. How did it end? I asked. Cody left, slamming the door. Ellis stayed behind to deal with the aftermath of the leak. My guys and I spent the rest of the night salvaging equipment and files. We were able to recover some of it, but a lot of it had to be rebuilt. Tanner finished his beer and looked at me seriously. Marion, I don't know what your plans are, but Fisherman's Wharf is in real trouble right now. Without your photos, with damaged layouts, and in the midst of the Pryor family drama, the magazine may not survive this crisis. I nodded, realizing the gravity of the situation. Deep down, I didn't want Fisherman's Whirlpool to close. Despite my conflict with Cody, I loved the magazine and was proud of my work for it. Have you decided what you're going to do yet? Tanner asked. I remembered Veronica Rand's offer attractive, generous, but somehow vaguely unsettling. Not yet, I answered, but I was close to a decision. As we said goodbye at the bar, the rain began to fall, still light but promising to intensify by nightfall. Tanner lifted the collar of his jacket. You know what the ironic thing is? He said. Cody always claimed that anyone could be replaced, and it turns out that without your pictures, the whole magazine was in jeopardy. He shook my hand and hurried to his car. I remained standing under the bar's visor, watching the raindrops crashing on the sidewalk. A strange feeling swept over me, a mixture of satisfaction that my worth had been recognized and bitterness at the cost of that recognition. My cell phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Ellis. Need to talk urgently. The situation is critical. Some of the layouts have been lost. Without your photos, we can't release the issue. Meet me at my place tomorrow morning at 9. I stared at the screen, pondering. Then I pulled out Veronica Rand's business card and fiddled with it for a long time. 2 publishers, 2 opportunities, 2 paths. The rain was intensifying, turning into a downpour. It was time to make a decision. I dialed the number and put the phone to my ear. After the 3rd beep, there was an answer on the other end. Sometimes decisions are made not by reason, but by something deeper: intuition, affection, a sense of loyalty. When I ended the phone call, standing in the pouring rain, I already knew what I was going to do next. Veronica Rand was surprised by my quick denial. Are you sure, Marion? She asked me again. Our offer will remain on the table for 2 more days. Perhaps we should think it over. I've already thought it over, I replied. Thank you for the offer, but I must decline. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Veronica said with a slight chuckle, Fisherman's mouth isn't worth that kind of loyalty, Mr. Holt, especially after the way you've been treated. It's not a matter of loyalty, I countered. It's just that I prefer to resolve conflicts rather than run away from them. Suit yourself, she sounded disappointed. But if you change your mind, I know where to call, I finished for her. The rain was getting heavier and I hurried home. Halfway there, it started raining, turning the streets into rivers. A storm, not as bad as Delilah's, but nasty enough to hit Savannah, as if nature had decided to test the city's mettle once again. When I got to my apartment, the first thing I did was check my email. Ellis hadn't just sent a message, he'd sent pictures of the damaged office. The roof over the design department had indeed been partially torn off, and water had flooded several workstations. I replied briefly, "I'll be there tomorrow at 9. Then I went to the bookcase and pulled out an external hard disk hidden between the books. It held backups of all my work for Fisherman's Whirlpool, every shot, every series, even drafts and failed shots. I never really deleted them despite the ostensible gesture of cleaning out the server. In the morning, the storm had abated a bit, but the rain continued. I arrived at the Fisherman's Whirlpool office 15 minutes before the appointed time and was surprised to find the door unlocked. Usually on weekends, the building was secured and one could only enter with an electronic pass. The lobby was empty and quiet, with only raindrops pounding on the roof and the sound of noise somewhere in the back of the building. I went up the stairs to the second floor, where the main departments were located, and immediately saw the consequences of the disaster. Part of the corridor was flooded, with sweat on the walls and water dripping from the ceiling in some places. The sounds were coming from the design department, a large open space with a dozen workstations. That's where I found Ellis, in jeans and an old t-shirt, mop in hand. He was trying to push the water out through the doorway onto the balcony. Next to him, computers, monitors, hard drives wrapped in plastic wrap were piled on tables. "Ellis?" I called out to him. He turned around and I could see how exhausted he was. His eyes were red from sleep deprivation. His gray hair was slick with sweat and his face had 2 days' worth of stubble. "Marion!" He exhaled with obvious relief. "You're here. Thank you." He set the mop aside and walked over to me, holding out his hand. "The situation is worse than I thought," he said without preamble. "The roof leaked in 3 places. Most of the computers have been saved, but the server room is at risk. Water has started seeping through the ceiling. And that's where all our archives, databases, programs." I looked around. Several desks were clearly damaged by water. There were puddles on the floor, and in the corner of the room I could see a huge hole in the ceiling, through which water was dripping. "Where is everyone else?" I asked. "Why are you alone?" Ellis grinned bitterly. "It's Saturday. I didn't call anyone. People were already exhausted from yesterday's rush. The technicians were supposed to be here by noon, but until then, I'm trying to salvage what I can." I took off my jacket and rolled up my shirt sleeves. "What do you need to do?" Ellis nodded gratefully. "The main thing is to save the server room. If water gets in, show me," I said. For the next 2 hours we worked tirelessly. First, we moved the most important servers to a safe place on the first floor. Then we built a makeshift system to divert water away from the remaining ones, using plastic gutters and buckets. Then we went back to the design department and continued to move the equipment out. We hardly spoke at all during the work, only short phrases: "Hold it here," "Careful with the wires," "Let's move it." But there was a tacit understanding between us, like people united by a common goal. Finally, when the most important thing was saved, we sat down on dry chairs in the corner of the room, exhausted but satisfied with the result. "Thank you," Ellis said, wiping the sweat from his forehead. I nodded. "You're welcome. After all, it was my job too, in a way." Ellis looked at me carefully. "After everything that's happened, do you still consider Fisherman's Wharf yours?" I wondered. "Did I really think of the magazine as mine? After Cody's insults, after the defiant deletion of photos, after the competitor's offer?" "Yes," I finally answered. "I do. 12 years isn't just the length of a contract. It's part of life." Ellis nodded, as if that was the answer he'd expected. "You know," he said, looking out the window at the rain, "when I found out you'd deleted all the pictures, I was furious. Then I was desperate. Then I tried to figure out why. And when I realized, he shook his head. I was ashamed. For Cody, for myself, for the way we did business. He turned to me. Marion, I want to apologize for not seeing what was going on, for letting my son treat you and the other employees like that. It's unforgivable. I accept the apology, I said. I was quiet for a moment, listening to the rain drumming on the roof. Then I pulled a flash drive out of my pocket and handed it to Ellis. Here, I said. Here are all the photos for the special edition. Full resolution, processed, ready for publication. Ellis stared at the flash drive, then at me. But you deleted them. From the server, from all the media. I shook my head. I deleted them from your server, but I always have backups of all my work over the years. Ellis took the flash drive slowly, as if it were a precious artifact. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I wanted you to understand the value of my work, I answered. Not just financially, but as a human being. Creative. I wanted you to realize what these photos meant to the magazine. Ellis clenched the flash drive in his fist. We did. Believe me. We realized it very well. I stood up and walked over to the window. The rain had almost stopped, but the sky remained gray and heavy. What's going to happen to Cody? I asked. Ellis sighed heavily. We talked for a long time yesterday. A very long time. He admitted that he'd overstepped his bounds in dealing with his employees. But he doesn't think his approach to management was wrong. He's convinced the business needs to be more aggressive. Ellis shook his head. I offered him a choice. Either rethink his attitude and take a course in human resource management or find himself in another field. He took time out to think. I understand, I said. Not an easy decision for a father. For a son, too, Ellis added. But sometimes the hard lessons are the most valuable. 3 months later, the Fisherman's Whirlpool office was completely rebuilt. New roof, fresh renovations, updated equipment. Even the air seemed fresher and lighter. The special on trophy fishing on Lake Okeechobee came out on time and was a resounding success. My photo series won an industry award and the magazine sold out in a week, a record for the past 5 years. Southern Fisherman also ran a piece on Okeechobee, but it went virtually unnoticed in the background of our publication. Veronica Rand sent me a short note. You made the right choice. Respect. Cody, after much deliberation, decided to stay with the company, but in a different role. He became head of digital marketing, where his assertiveness and ambition came in handy. Our relationship remained cool but correct. He even apologized, reluctantly but sincerely. And I continued to do what I did best, tell stories through pictures. But now I had another role to play, a mentor to young photographers who were just starting out in the profession. I walked to the window. The sun was setting over the Savannah River, coloring the river in golden tones, perfect light for photography. I pulled out my camera and took the shot, just for myself, no contract or deadline. Sometimes the most important shots are the ones we take for our own souls. They remind us why we chose this path, why we keep pressing the shutter button over and over again, trying to catch the elusive beauty of the world. And if someone says this work is worthless, the answer is simple. It's priceless. Because the real value of creativity is not measured by money, but by how much it touches people's hearts, how much it changes their view of the world. And that, I believe, is the true vocation of a photographer.